Hey everyone, Phil Plisky here. In the last video, I talked about the MP3 study that we did on nearly 1,500 soldiers and following them out for a year, identifying the risk factors, a number of risk factors that make someone at increased risk for injury. If you haven't watched that video, I think it's a really helpful background to understand what I'm talking about in the next phase of the studies that we did. So basically, to recap that really quickly, we tested over 1,466 soldiers on 86 historical and demographic information items, survey items, and physical tests, and identified the most robust risk factors for injury. The biggest finding from the study, though, is that the number of risk factors, as you add those up, the more risk factors you have, the more likely you're going to get hurt. But time and time again, a previous injury keeps coming up as it's probably the most robust risk factor for future injury. And that happened in this study as well. Separately, both prior injury, profile time, as well as SANE score, and remember that SANE score is what percent of function I've recovered from my previous injury. All of those were independent risk factors. And so we're looking at, well, like, what's happening, or what do we need to be doing after someone gets hurt? So here's what we did this time. We looked at these same physical tests, but looked at people who were returning to duty. So at the end of rehabilitation, and now they're going to return to duty, what do they look like with regard to these number of risk factors? So we looked, over 400 people who were returning to duty, and we said, okay, if we know the number of risk factors, and these risk factors are robust for future injury, what do they look like? Well, this was mind-boggling to me. So with those people who were returning to duty, so they have completed their rehabilitation process or medical clearance to return to duty, and what percentage of those people had 5 or more risk factors? Because remember, 5 or more risk factors, is almost certain that you were going to get injured again. So what percentage? 70% of the people returning to duty had 5 or more risk factors. When we compared that to our previous study, when we looked at people who had been injured in the past 5 years, 40% had 5 or more risk factors. Now, if we look at the people who hadn't had an injury, only 7% had risk factors. Now, so this is going to tell us a lot here. There's one more finding. There's tons of findings from this, because basically we tested the people and then also followed them out for a year to know better what the cut points should be for all these physical performance tests and historical tests. But those findings will be coming out later. This is what we presented at CSM this year. And the other finding is 44% had pain with the top tier SFMA. So we added in the SFMA and some additional return to sport testing or return to duty testing, higher level things. But 44% had pain with very basic, simple movements. So this is the big crux of the study. I think maybe that this many people have pain is totally not surprising to us, but that it's with simple movements. It's not even with complex movements that they have pain. But this is profound as well. When we see that 70% of people that we're discharging after an injury, that we're saying they can return to work, they can return to duty, 70% have 5 or more risk factors, and all the way down to those people who haven't been hurt, only 7% have 5 or more risk factors. So I think what this tells us is we're probably managing the local problem that they have very well. And I think, if they have a knee problem or a back problem, I think we're looking at the joints above and below. I think that's really common. I think we might even be looking at, so we're looking at thoracic mobility or hip mobility for back pain, and hip and ankle and knee for any kind of knee pain or ankle problems. I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. But I think, so we're managing the local problem, but I don't think we're managing risk factors. I think it's almost a way we need to think about people under our care separately. Let's get them out of pain, certainly. Let's address the impairments we find, but let's measure the risk factors for future injury and see where they are on that. I think we can change our practice, and I can think we can change the lives of the people who are under our care. So I really think you can apply this information and go, hey, am I looking at the number of risk factors that someone has when I'm treating them as a patient? And that alone, I think, will change what we're doing. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to email me through the contact information below. I'd love to help you out.